Hi, my name is Rutendo Nyamuda, and welcome back to another phenomenal, exciting episode of In My 20s. In My 20s. I want to say happy birthday to In My 20s. It is our second anniversary, and so we're celebrating 49 incredible discussions, 49 incredible guests, 49 incredible mind moments, and 49 discussions about the 20s journey and the quarter life crisis. Thank you all so much for your support, to our guests, to our listeners, to people who just comment and share. Thank you so much. Also want to let you know, for those of you who want to start a podcast, definitely check out the Podcast Sessions digital magazine. There is a link below, so download it, subscribe, and never miss an issue of the digital magazine. Today we're going to jumpstart into the episode. It is also our 50th episode. Wow, so much to be celebrating. And we are delighted to have Sibabalwe on today's show. Enjoy the episode. But before we get into the heart and soul of everything, I want you to give us some insights into who you are. Who is Sibabalwe? Where are you from? What is your history? And how did you get to where you are today?
Okay, so I just wanted to say before I introduce myself that I'm super excited to be joining you on this platform. I think it's great that Black women kind of hold space for each other, and that in a small way, it's really quite validating to have someone give you a platform to just speak about yourself and how you've gotten to where you are. So as I introduce myself, I'm Sibabalwe. My friends call me Siba. That's my street name. But really, I would say I identify as a Black queer woman in South Africa. I was born and bred in rural Eastern Cape, in a very small village called Eblaisutu. And I always like to start with that because where I'm from is so important to me. And also, I think that sometimes there are misconceptions about what you can become when you're from a certain part of the world or country. So just to start off and really take pride in where I come from, and also mention that it's actually played a big role in shaping who I am now. I was born to a single parent who was a teen mom, but I had a great childhood with mostly women role models. So all my aunts and my grandmother were all at some point in time my primary caregivers and guardians, because my mom had to go and finish school, obviously, after giving birth to me. So I actually moved around a lot also while I was younger. I have been to about 6 schools across the Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, and Gauteng provinces. I was a very active child in high school. You could find me I like to think of myself as like that participation kid. That was me. Wherever there was anything that I felt I could do, I would always sign up. So debating, choir, drama plays, hockey, public speaking, like you name it. And through my participation, obviously, then started holding leadership roles in schools, which I didn't know then, but would play such a big role in the leadership roles you hold later on in life. When you're much younger, it feels as though it's something that you do, or if it's been an aspiration of yours that you always imagine that you would do something like that. But when you come out of it, people want to know, like, what did you do in high school? And so I went to an all-girls school, actually, Kimberley Girls High School.
Which school?
Kimberley Girls High School.
Okay.
Very, very very kind of like modest and traditional school. And I was the head girl there in my year. And also weird. I don't think it's that obvious, but I mean, okay. And this will be important for something I touch on later, but I was thinking about it recently that I actually did a school pageant. It was called Miss GHS. So it was called Kimberley Girls High School. So the GHS stands for Girls High School. And in 2011, they brought it back. I don't know if it was something that really existed, but they were kind of like, you know what, let's do it. And then there was a junior GHS and senior GHS. And my friends actually signed me up because I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And then I ended up winning. And it was just very interesting. Anyway.
I know we're going to touch on this later, but this is like one of those monumental moments people pause back in time. Like if you look at Beyonce when she talks about like how she was always a dancer, when they do your your life story, they're going to go back to that footage. I'm just letting you know. So anyone with that footage, please let us know where to at. Continue.
I don't know if at that time we were documenting things as often and as much as we do now, but I know that there's a grainy picture somewhere on Facebook with me and a little tiara and a sash. So when I left high school, I went to pursue my undergrad in economics and international relations at UCT. I was very determined when I got to university, and I was one of those people. I knew which courses I wanted to do from the get. Like, I had planned out my majors, I planned out everything, and I think planning is such an important part and aspect of me, because to some extent it is both a strength and a weakness, and having to learn to part with some of those things and those structures that give purpose to you is where I think some of my biggest growth has happened. So got there, and naturally university was difficult. Oh my God, I don't know how many courses I failed before I found myself excelling in academics again, because that's the other thing, is you come out of high school feeling like you've achieved it all, right? And then you get to university, but everyone there has achieved it all, like it's like really that thing. And sometimes it's not about how hard you apply yourself, it's about how well you can grasp concepts and whether something really interests you. So if you've taken an academic path that maybe your parents have had a hand in choosing, then you don't relate to things as much. And for me, my first choice would have been to do performing arts, because my mother is a performing artist, and she was like, over my dead body, I'm not paying you, I'm not paying for you to do that. Go get a degree, and if you want to do it, you can do it part-time in your own time, but I'm not gonna pay for you to do drama. So her next choice was accounting, because I liked accounting in high school and I happened to be good at it, but I was like, hell no. Now I'm like, oh my God, I should have become a CA. What? But we settled on, my compromise with her was economics. I was like, okay, so this is a great mix of some of the mathematical skills that I have, but I'm really also interested in writing. I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in social justice. And I then kind of changed. I wanted to do international relations honors, but I actually ended up in in justice and transformation. That's what the name of the course was called. And it is there that I really found my passion in social justice. I was actually like, thank goodness that everything I planned didn't work out the way that I did, because I wouldn't be where I am, and I wouldn't have found what I think is so closely linked to my purpose and my calling in this world. So yeah, the research paper I wrote about was using applied theater as a mechanism of transitional justice. So basically saying that when a country has gone through a conflict period, you usually get people called justice practitioners that come into the country and try to kind of help repair and restore not only what physically was the country, but also the interactions between people. And I said that theater really has a role that it could be a big feature in that, because there's something that intrinsically happens when you listen to someone else's story, and you bear witness to it, but also that you also get to share yours. And it doesn't need to be in English, it can be in home languages. So using your body, using art and theater as a medium of expression can do so much for healing in societies. And it was actually based on a film and a play that my mother had done. So it was called Truth in Translation, and it followed interpreters in apartheid who worked for the TRC. And they were told that they were just vessels of the information that in translating, that they couldn't get attached. But the thing about it was that you're speaking about all of these gruesome things that are happening in first person. I was assaulted, or I watched as my father was killed, all of those kinds of things. So they then took the play to different war-torn countries across the world, and then they were filmed as they moved through it, and then they made a mini documentary film out of it. So two things about that was, first of all, for young Black people, it is so difficult to feel like you have social capital in your own stories and in the things that our parents do. Like, there are very few parents who are able to have or hold jobs that I feel like are things that they're interested in. For a lot of us, it's about survival. having, it's about what's immediate, and it's about what responsibilities you hold. And so to be able to archive part of her story and her life in the academy, because all of us go to university, we spend so much time there, then we do some research thing, and it's great, but like it has no essence of who you are and no trace any of that. So it was just so beautiful to kind of be like, you know what, yes, you were 16, you had me, a whole lot of people probably thought it would never amount to something, and then I put her in a body of work that exists in an institution somewhere. So yeah, that is me. I need to wrap up this intro, but I've had one job outside of varsity. It was for a social justice movement fighting for quality and equality in the South African education system. And I worked as their parliamentary officer and a researcher. And lots of people will know me for being in Miss SA last year. And yeah, so now I'm trying to branch into social entrepreneurship as I figure myself out.
Wow. All of the wows. As you're talking, I'm like literally like note taking. I'm like, okay. Super impressive. There is no doubt. Okay, so when we watch, I don't think people understand the caliber of women in South Africa, on the continent, across the African continent, when it comes to being smart, when it comes to being I can be both, when it comes to not settling in one identity or one construct in terms of what people say you should be. There are things that you just said that all of them are basically podcasts in their own. One, the social capital of your stories, owning the social capital of your stories. That is so weighted. That is so weighted. The way you explained it and the way you took us through that story and that journey. I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm blown away by that. And then the other beautiful contrast that you made was, looking into the economics of theatre. And again, two worlds that we often don't see clashing, unless the economist is like, I want to be entertained, I'm going to go to the theater, and you've managed to bring these worlds together. And that said, I feel like this is, leading into part of our main discussion of today is oftentimes we're so boxed into being one thing. If you told me that you studied economics and public relations, I'd be like, great, she's an economist or she's working in public relations. But there is this whole arts, there's this creative side to you that has definitely come through from your mum. It's in your genetics as well. Tell me about the balance of being both.
Oh, I think it's difficult, especially from my context, growing up, being socialized, to think that there was ever a perfect or right way to do anything or to be. So I start because I like to say that if you can think of anyone who was ever a prototype of what being a perfect girl was, I was that person. I quickly realized that it was just me and my mom. My father wasn't in the picture. So I was kind of like, okay, I need to be the best me that I can be to help her along, right? So I can't do my own things. I can't go off on a tangent. I can't be disobedient. I can't not comply. And interestingly, I was speaking to someone and saying, in all these 6 schools that I went to, I never once picked a school, which I suppose it's not a big deal. I don't think that it's like a deal breaker, but I was always just there to kind of execute what decisions my different guardians thought were the best decision to help me along. And so when I got to university, for the first time, I found myself getting to choose, getting to have that narrative and identity of what I thought I was and who I thought I was challenged. Because so many people are going to just be like, but like, why do you do that? And why do you dress like that? And my first response was to be super defensive, because how can you try and, just like cause havoc with everything I think I understand about the world and myself? And then slowly I was like, damn, the only answer I have is because of my mom, which is a very important one, but it never really factors me and also I've never given my space, I suppose, to think about those things. So I did an elective. This is now part of the courses and electives that weren't on the original list, and I'm forever grateful for things like that. I did an elective in gender studies, and the lecturer was kind of like, them was like, how do you know you like the things you like? Why do you wear the dresses? Why do you dress the way you do? And I sat there and I was like, from this day onwards, I'm going to make every single decision based on what I want and what I best. And I think that might have been the beginning of the unmolding or the cracking of trying to fit whatever idea I thought I had to be. Because that's the other thing, is no one really says to you, oh, Rutendo, you need to be XYZ. But there's this kind of, the way in which we're brought up makes it possible for us to infer those things from the way they and you know, the ways that people respond to things. So growing up then became about understanding the parts of myself and my identity that I never really got to choose, and how I respond to people, and working to unlearn those things. You know, if I didn't have a solid reason for why I did something or why I believed in something, I wouldn't defend it. I would actually work to understand where it comes from, and then settle on a new understanding on whether, you know, that is what I want. And also, just touching on my identity, there weren't any queer people around in rural Eastern Cape where I grew up, for at least for me. Like, I'd never seen that version of womanhood, of femininity, kind of being portrayed. Oh yes. Sorry, I wanted to add this. Something is happening here in the house. You'll have to edit this part out. So just like listening to what was going on, but I'm back. So anyway, being queer was something that was so outside of my world, literally nothing that I ever could have imagined. And also university kind of brought that space for me that I could explore another version of myself that was outside of what I thought I had to be. All the women in my family are cishet women, like, so no brainer. I'm also going to grow up. I'm going to get married to a man. I'm going to have a version of the lifestyle I've seen forever, you know. But interestingly, when I was in high school, so my mom's a performing artist. She played a lesbian character on TV, and I remember being like so uncomfortable watching that. And then I realized, you know, many years later, that it was probably my own discomfort, because things can always be different and you can take the time to warm up to it, but things don't make you uncomfortable just because they're different. I don't know if that makes So I had to unpack. I was like, oh my gosh, why am I finding this weird? Why am I finding this funny? Like, why am I so perturbed by it? But just like also the importance of representation, because that mold of Siba doesn't exist if she had seen it kind of portrayed literally in front of her.
Yeah. So was that kind of your first encounter of, you know, you identifying or you feeling like, I think I'm queer, or I am queer? And because how does that journey unravel or unfold for you?
It is in varsity, and it is quite a tumultuous one, because the first time you have to reckon with that part of yourself, you want to justify it within the means and the limitations of the things you know and understand. So no, I'm only attracted to this woman. It's not all women. It's just like, it's fine. Like, it's not, you know, there's something about them. It's not really, I'm not really, no. And then you get to that understanding that actually, I think it's just beyond just one person. Then which of the acronyms on LGBTQIA+ do you then use to identify yourself, which I also found to be quite a daunting experience for me. And remember, you've lived as this person all of your life, and now I keep thinking, what am I going to say to all my friends and everyone who's known me all of this time? Like, we were taking guys out together, and I'm like, but I didn't fake that. Like, I genuinely was interested in those people, but but I'm also interested in other people. You know what I mean? So I think that needing to label it, because it was, and I think the anxiety of finding a word that resonated for me came from knowing that it was something I was going to interact with. So if I came back to someone, I was like, oh, I'm dating a woman now, they were going to be like, oh, so what are you? Are you like lesbian now? Are you like gay? You know? And I was like, you know what? I've done this thing where I've boxed myself before, and I'm not going to do it again. So I'm going to be not going to limit my orientation or my identity to make other people feel comfortable, or to even shortchange what my experience could be.
Yeah. And I can only imagine, on top of everything else that one goes through, especially in that time of your life where you are trying to figure out, what am I doing? What is my calling? What is my purpose? I'm no longer, considered a young kid under the household. I'm now stepping out, trying to figure out how you identify. And for you, not for everybody else around you.
Exactly.
Did you find when you were having those conversations with both friends and family that it was an easy conversation to have, or did you find that you were met with some resistance?
No, it was fairly easy. I think that I can be grateful for the spaces that we moved in, that the idea of being different wasn't something that was othered, right? So I think that there was also, being drawn to social justice and having a passion in making a world more equitable. I think the kind of people I kept around also kind of had those same general ideas about, we all need to be able to express ourselves the way we want. We all need to be able to identify as we want. We all have the freedom and space to choose, which parts make us who we are. So in terms of friendships, I really don't think that it was difficult. If anything, I do think that I may have overthought it for myself, not like preparing for resistance that doesn't exist, which is even so much harder, because I think that for a time, I actually stayed away from people I cared about because I was avoiding having the conversation. And so it was kind of like, there's a world in which I don't have to explain this. And so I just went there. I am, and I'm enough. There's no conversation, there's no understanding, there's no unpacking. But because I'd created this idea that if I met anyone from a time that wasn't the one that I'm in now, I would have to explain. I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm not ready. I'm going to just stay away. And when it comes to family, my dad used to always ask me every holiday when I came back from university, oh, so like how's school, how are things going? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you seeing anyone? And then one day I was like, why does it only have to be a boyfriend? Like, why don't you just ask me if like I'm not seeing anyone, or and he was like, oh, okay, cool, like swag. And then the next time I came back, he was like, oh, okay, so are you seeing anyone? You got a boyfriend? You got a girlfriend? My parents are very young. They're like in their 40s. I mean, there's a 16-year age difference between my mom. So if she was playing a lesbian character on TV, and I mean, it doesn't necessarily translate into your own personal politics, but I want to say that she's like, yeah, she's amazing. And it wasn't even a thing. I think the only thing that happened was that I called her to say, listen, so that I like someone. And she was like, what? And I was like, oh yeah. And also this is where we met. She was like, no ways, really. It was a very, I didn't have a coming out story. There was no chat. There was nothing. I was just kind of like, this is who I'm seeing now. It was like, swag, cool, let's go with it.
Wow. I love that.
I've had conversations with like aunts, which have been, I think maybe the only person who doesn't really understand is my grandmother. I said, oh, you remember that girl that came by the house? Yeah, the one that you spoke to. Yeah, no, so she's my partner. Oh, you say your girlfriend? Oh, okay. And then like stopped there, and I was like, I don't know if she understands what I'm saying.
You can say you had the chat. You had the chat. You did you chatted. You had the chat. You chatted the chat with your gran. Cool. No one can say.
Yeah, and it didn't change anything about the way that she, responded or interacted with me beyond that. And I also think that the fact that her daughter had to play that public role, because like her daughter is a performing artist and people know her, and link the two together. So now when she played that role, I'm sure it must have come back to her. And people were like, okay, what's going on? But it's beautiful what you can achieve when you're really open to just learning and unlearning. It's that simple, at whatever age and with whatever you encounter.
Definitely. I want to, stay on identity just a little bit, because last year, every single headline that was written about you, and I'm not even joking, was that you were South Africa's first openly queer Miss South African contestant. Wow, contest. A whole contest. That you were South Africa's first openly queer Miss South African contestant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so interesting for a number of reasons, is because when you were reading about other contestants, their identity, yes, wasn't as highlighted as much, but other aspects of them weren't necessarily highlighted as much. But there wasn't a single headline that spoke about you being the first openly queer contestant. And for some strange reason, it bothered me a little bit, because I was like, there is so much more to you. How were the conversations with you? And did you find that was like the consistent kind of theme throughout a lot of your interviews? Or were there people who were actually like, tell us more about you?
Yeah, I felt like it was very one-sided in what the angle rather of the story that people wanted to cover. And I remember I said this to you in our pre-chat, that I would get a call from a journalist or get an email, and they were like, listen, so we saw your interview with so-and-so, and we'd like you to talk to us about the same thing. I'm like, first of all, I haven't even seen this interview. I have no idea. But what I'm seeing is that everyone wants to tell the story of me being queer on this platform, but I need to say it in a different way so that it's not the same, but it's the same really at the end of the day. So, and at first, it was empowering to be able to talk about that. I mean, it's super scary. It feels like coming out all over again, except there's cameras and people wanting to hear the story now. Like you're not speaking about it in your little corner. You're doing it in front of everyone, and also opening yourself up to so much unknown. People might embrace it or might not. But anyway, so it was super scary, but I found it so empowering to be able to speak about it and to talk about it. And then by like interview number 10, I was like, okay, I'm still talking about it, but that's cool. Now I'm just going to get a little bit smarter and try to change the conversation and bring it back to something else and be like, I'm super happy to be here and standing for the LGBTQI community, which is really in line with me being a social justice activist, and I stand for so many other things that I'm passionate about. But the conversation always circled back, to the same thing. And I remember saying to you that I strongly believe in the power of the single story. Like, I had an interview with someone, I kind of knew that at least this will reach more people that hopefully haven't seen the last thing. And in that, we're changing narratives, we're changing mindsets, or at least we're disrupting. There's a form of activism in there, even though you don't necessarily know that it's going to be happening. But I do feel that it was all that I became reduced to, and not even in a bad way. Like, I'll stand up and talk about it any other day, but getting to introduce myself the way I did at the beginning of this interview wasn't something that was necessarily there. All of the questions kind of pre-packaged to only ask about that. And for one person that I did speak to, they were like, I just want you to know that you need to understand that we've literally never had this before. Okay. That's why we all want to know. That's why we keep asking. It's not that anyone means any harm. It's literally because for some people who are queer, it's exciting for them to get to write about another queer person who's doing that. And you never know, someone else is writing because they have a family member who's queer. They have a friend who's queer, and they get to do a story about, like, damn, look at this. Like, other people are also making space, for queer people in your non-traditional spaces, if we may call it, right? So it was more than I could have ever asked for, because the support that came with it was also just amazing. Not once did one homophobic comment, and quite frankly, I never went into it thinking that there would be. Again, there's so many queer people around us, you know, people, there's trans people, there's gay people, there's lesbian people, there's intersex people, and to think that, like, I really didn't think that being queer made me special in that way. So to also get that much attention around it, I was like, oh, okay, so we're a little bit more conservative still, you know. Our constitution allows for so much, but really at community level, the conversations are still very, very different. And it wasn't too long ago that, like, lesbian women were being raped as corrective rape. Trans women are still dying to this day, you know. Non-binary people are still being misgendered, all which are active acts of just active acts of, I suppose like homophobia in one way, but also just a willingness to learn and a willingness to know that there's so much more that exists outside our little bubbles.
Yeah. I guess this is more of a question and not a statement or anything. It's very interesting to hear you speak, and I think on the one hand, 100% agree with you. There is representation matters, and representation is important. And hearing the single story narrative, you being the first Miss South African queer contest, is important, was really important. I think it also opens up the minds and the hearts of a number of people who perhaps maybe didn't necessarily know because they never engaged or never asked the questions, or that's part of it. So this is kind of my statement. Is at what point are you seen holistically for who you are? So there are discussions even in terms of business where people will say, you know, as a Black female in business, again, representation important, but can you see me as a person in business? Can you see me as a woman in business? Can you? So that's kind of the it's not a struggle. It's just, I know we're nowhere near that in society, where we're not needing to have people in positions because we need to have representation and it matters, and having diverse stories. And so we're not telling one story is important. But at what point do we get to where we're like, actually, being queer is not the first thing that I mention when you walk into a room, and being a Black female is not the first thing that's mentioned when you walk into a room. You can walk into the room, be you just happen to be Black female and queer. It just happens to be part of the story instead of it being the main story.
You know, I've thought about this quite a lot. And I think what I've settled on is we can't get to that point if everyone doesn't have a general understanding of what is the matter of fact. So I usually use the example of saying, say we're talking about rights, okay? And we're talking about how we all have equal rights, but other people don't know this. Other people don't know that I enjoy the same rights as they do, and that I need to access them simply by being a human being. I qualify. So until we let everyone understand that we're all equal before the law in that sense, right? We all hold and enjoy the same kind of rights. Then we can build on it and say, but then when we're talking about rights, there's also reproductive rights. When we're talking about rights, there's also right of expression, you know? But for as long as there isn't a common understanding, for as long as, you know, the ways in which we share information about people who are different to what is normal or whatever you want to call it, we're not going to get there.
Yeah.
And so really, I want to get to a place where I walk in and I'm not Black, woman, and queer. I really do. It'd be great. But that's not the fight we're fighting, or at least that's not the fight I'm fighting. The fight I'm fighting is I need to make you understand that you can be all of these things, first of all. And once you understand, it becomes less glaring for you who interacts with it on a much less regular basis, so that by the time that you wrap your head around it, the next person you speak to, that's your understanding, So yeah, it's exhausting. Yeah, it is. All activist work is like that. They talk about an activism burnout in some spaces because the things that we stand for are so personal and so interlinked to who we are that after a while you really are fatigued, because sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm fighting for rights. It feels like I'm fighting for me and to be seen and to be heard. But yeah, just like we need to work on our first level understanding before we can build on it or even expect to get there. And more people that are adamant about holding those spaces, the faster we're going to get there. It's better don't shy ourselves out, because the truth is there is a version of a world where people get to live like that, and that's what we're working
on. Yes. See, this is why you were a contestant and I wasn't. No, but
you would have held it down. I
would have been like, this would be, thank you for your question, and then I just smile while I think. But beautifully well said. And I think that's the thing. It's like, on the one hand is you can come home and not feel like you have to have that fight. I don't have to fight being a Black female, Zimbabwean born, South African raised at home. I don't. Yeah. But the minute I step out into meetings, the minute I step out into conversations, the minute I step out and I realize that I actually am the only one here.
Yes.
That's when you realize that, oh, this is why we're fighting. And how do I fight so that I'm not the only one in this room? How do I then start bringing people up into this space, into these rooms to have these discussions? So I think that's the thing. And we always wearing so many hats. We walk around, people, you just flip them.
On and off.
On and off. I'm actually listening to one of my favorite podcasts called Code Switch, and it actually speaks about how Black people or people of color, in one space, when you're with your people, you speak one way, your mannerisms are a certain way, and then when you go into these more westernized pockets, how you
yeah, switch it up.
Switch it up. It's very interesting, very interesting. But so insightful, and thank you for that. I think that's fundamental. What you've just said now is incredibly fundamental. We're standing on the shoulders essentially of the people who have fought fights before us. We're fighting a different fight. We see it across whether it's all linked. It's all linked, from the Black Lives Matter movements to social justice movements, to every single kind of fight. The reason why we can have these discussions is because people had the discussions, people fought before. So the question is, what are we doing to make it easier for the generations to come as well? Yeah. On that note, I'm going to switch it up into our 20s journey. One of my favorite sections of this podcast. And in actual honesty, the reason I actually created this entire podcast was just to speak to people about the quarter life crisis. But before we get there, how would you summarize your 20s journey thus far? Also, how old are you, by the way?
Oh, I'm 25, right smack bang in the middle.
Hey.
There. Age. I would say, so I wrote a little couple of points here that I think I would say it's the best roller coaster with some of the worst dips. That's like, it's a beautiful journey, and yet I get so down sometimes, and it gets so hard, and it feels so challenging, but it doesn't take away from the excitement of it. It doesn't take away from how much fun you have along the ride. I think that that is in relation to the relationships you have, what emotions you have, the financial responsibilities you feel, navigating mental health. In my case, your identity and the world around you, is that it's all a roller coaster, and some of it up and some of it is down.
It really does feel like that. Hey, you're just like, oh my word, it's great, we're having fun, and then you're like, oh no, this is really tough.
I saw a post on Instagram that said Corona coaster, the ups and downs during a pandemic. One day you're working out, enjoying your little bubble, making banana bread, and then the next you're crying and you don't even know what's going on and missing people you don't like. I'm like, yep.
Missing people you don't like?
Not that part.
But everything else, no, 100% agree. And so tell me, you are 25, smack bang in the middle of your 20s, beautiful journey. Have you experienced the quarter life crisis? Are you currently experiencing it? And if you have or are, what is it?
I think I have, and I'm not entirely sure when you're out of it. So I mean, I'll get back to you on that one. But just like at the beginning of this year, I decided to quit my job. I cut my hair myself. I mean, I am no hairstylist, but I took that pair of scissors and I snapped. And I think that sometimes there's this idea that when you in your 20s, you need to have some things on lock. And it is to compare yourself to your peers. Like, whether you want to or not, you are looking at people's lives every single day and inadvertently making a little mental checklist of, oh wait, but I don't, oh wait, okay, no, I'm good there. Oh no, but so I think that was my biggest thing, was like, I woke up and I kind of wasn't fulfilled trying to emulate that anymore. Because I also bought into it. That's the thing, is that I don't think we should lie about having wanted things that we were taught to want, or made to believe that you should have. And so it's really a shedding of that need and that idea that I need to have a 9 to 5. I mean, it would be great. I really would love to be employed, but I mean, I had it, and then I was like, I don't want it anymore, actually. I need to be in another space, even if it's just a break, but I don't want it here anymore. The idea that you need to, I mean, like property and vehicles and traveling and socializing in certain spaces and wearing Zara, and my face and makeup is done every single time. And maybe I've got a new preset filter on my Instagram. Like, I don't know to whom all of those things speak to, but I just mean, like, all of our lives, all we've done is fit in. All high school was for me was to fit in. And I moved around a lot as a kid, so it was always very important for me to find myself in the school I was in, or else you're going to be the new girl for like forever. So I was like, if that, I must find my people, and it's so important that we're all wearing the same thing. When everyone's color blocking, you're also color blocking. When everyone gets the latest sneaker, you also need, whether your parents can afford it or not, it's what you want, and it's what your social thing. So, like, I've only had one job right out of varsity, which was working for a social justice movement. And like, I mean, the career I've chosen has nothing lavish about it. All you're confronted with is realities of how people are struggling, how they are not being treated the way that they should be, even in the face of the law. And then in my spare time, I'm trying to emulate what? For who? So I think I actually was just kind of like, I'm sad at myself for having believed that that's what I wanted, and for also trying to create or recreate that idea. And then I was like, okay, so now I need to flip the script, or either throw away the script and I must start from scratch and figure it out. And it's been challenging as hell. Like, I spoke about control in the beginning and scheduling things and liking the idea of a plan and knowing. I don't know where I'm going. I literally have no idea. I think I know where I would like to be, but the little actions that get you there, you kind of need to develop as you go. And the confidence you have to regain in yourself in building that again, because I feel like for the last 3 years, I worked really hard to position myself as a particular person who would work in some spaces and would have this and do that.
Yeah.
And everything I mean, like without the preset of the pandemic that we have, I was feeling like that already, you know. So now, without having that, it's kind of like I must recreate my brand.
Yeah.
I must recreate Siba. I must recreate what she's about. I must recreate what she likes to do, how she relates to people. I must recreate what I think is success in this world for me. I, literally, I must just turn it upside down, and it's been very challenging, but I'm also so grateful for where I am, because I think that there's something about trusting yourself in some parts. Like I couldn't have stayed where I was. I knew that much.
Yeah.
I couldn't stay there, and if I had, I would have really, really ended up miserable or more miserable than I was. So I'm really happy that I took that decision to just kind of be like, okay, let's go for it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, particularly on the work side of things. I know everyone goes through their personal 20s journey, but on the work side of things, what I've found is very fascinating and fairly consistent among most people I know in their 20s. Looking back, is you have this idea of the job you're going to have. So you're in and you're like, okay, cool. Or even in high school, when I graduated or after high school, after varsity, this is the job I'm going into. And so when you get that certificate and you get that first job and you enter the job market and you're on a high, your natural high, just based on the fact that now you're in a space that you once envisioned yourself being in. And now that you're in that space, slowly you start finding that what you had envisioned this place to be and the working world and how it was going to look and feel, it's not that at all. So you definitely start questioning yourself, because you're like, everything that I thought, was it I, or did I just not have the proper view of reality, thinking that I was going to be able to earn money and pay bills and go out partying and buy label branded clothing. And then you realize there are expenses and there are responsibilities. And are you living by yourself? Are you living with people? What is your situation? And you're trying to juggle all of these things, but no one ever tells you, no one ever prepares you for this stretch of being in your 20s, where you literally go from basically a child, you're a teenager, to being a full-on adult and working as well. So
completely. I resonate so much with what you just said. Like, it's a wild ride. And coming back to what you said, that everyone's 20s journey is different, but it feels like you're there alone. It feels like everyone else's journey, they're on the right path. I don't know what it is that they're doing, but they have it figured out, and you're literally struggling here in your own path. And I think that sharing experiences is how we learn and how we grow. My biggest thing in life is that, like, I will ask for help anywhere, everywhere. And it served me well. It's not also a thing that we're necessarily always accustomed to, because sometimes not having all the answers feels like you're failing in some way. Like, why don't you know? Like, oh, haven't you figured it out? But just the idea of being comfortable with saying, I don't know, or I was wrong. I want to learn more, and I need someone else who's maybe walked this path, or just a peer who you can tag team. Like, okay, I figured out how this route works. You figured out how this part works. Let's join forces and let's keep going.
I really like that. And then asking for help. I myself know myself. I don't ask for help until the pieces have fallen apart. Which is bad, I know, but getting to a place where you're emotionally mature enough to say, and that's an insecurity, emotionally mature enough to say, look, I know I don't have the answers. I do need assistance. Please help. That is such a powerful position to be in. Working towards it. I'm still in my 20s for like a couple more months, so I've got time to figure it out.
Say on just a last bit on that, asking for help. It's also the habits we have serve us well for some time until they don't anymore. And so to unlearn, to not need help or to have never been in a position to ask for help is part of it. Being the high functioning, high achieving, and like go-getters that sometimes we are, means that for a lot of the time you're self-sufficient. But when you literally don't possess a certain skill set and someone who does, like, yeah, it's like, and also it's super humbling. It is super, super humbling. You really need to look inside yourself and just be like, what am I resisting for? Because ultimately it's also going to help me. And not everyone doesn't want to see you succeed. And that's what I'm asking for help, is that sometimes you need to gear up a little bit, get the courage, talk yourself to doing it. And once you do it, you suddenly feel so much better for having trusted it, or trusted yourself rather, to make that, because whatever was a struggle suddenly isn't. And that for me is always the feeling I return to. Is like, I know it was difficult, and sometimes you just maybe don't want to be a bother. Like, other people are very busy and they're doing their thing, so you don't know if you are taking out of their time, if they have time to give to you, but just like, and also avail yourself as someone that other people can then come to then also get help from. Because I've never understood why we would try to hog or monopolize knowledge. It really doesn't make any sense to me, because if you know how being in the know has helped you, surely you would want that for like the next person, just out of common courtesy. And if not, then whoever does approach, then you kind of like do the same thing. So it's really in those small things. And also that's as daunting, because you know how grateful you were when you got helped, and how another person will be when you help them.
Wow. Yes. Thank you so much. What training do they take you through for this Miss South Africa, like as a contestant? What training do you have? Because I feel like it's just, how is it? I think we've had the most amount of Miss South Africa's, Miss Worlds, Miss you name it, Miss Galaxy, and the list goes on.
It's Milky Way.
It's Milky Way. But I feel like your answers are so like poised, like they're just so like this is poster child. What do they tell you? How do they treat you?
Oh, wow. I think it would be a huge misrepresentation to only accredit this to Miss SA, first of all. That's not to say that you don't go through a grilling training while you're there. Obviously you do. But with Equal Education, I'd been doing quite a lot of media work. Yay! I've done interviews. And like, sometimes they are bad. Sometimes they are horrible. Sometimes they are last minute, and you need to figure out how you're going to get yourself from Khayelitsha to Greenpoint at the SABC studios in Cape Town. And for the longest time, I wasn't driving in Cape Town, so I was a public transport girl through and through. And you better know, give yourself enough time to leave now at the office so you can make it there. And sometimes you're taking taxi routes you've literally never taken before. Or it's a tight time of the month, and I can only afford the Uber back home. Like, I'm gonna taxi it this way, and I'm gonna Uber it back. Like, that's
faith it back. You're gonna faith ride.
So it was. So I think it's a combination of the two, and also the third part is trusting yourself. Is that if you've done it before, you can rely a little bit on that kind of like muscle memory, that I know what it's like to speak to someone. I know not to get as nervous as I usually do. But it obviously changed with settings. Like, when I was on that stage, I kid you not, if anyone was sitting in the front row, and they'll probably tell you when I was standing there, because you walk up and you like introduce yourself, stand, my legs were doing, they were shaking. And I was like, this is so embarrassing, Siba. But I'm like, also, this arena is full, like, this is scary. Oh, I'm not doing too much. I am scared. It's the truth. So there's that. The second part about it is being more concise with, okay, I'm not good at this, so nobody look at me for this, but being more concise about the parts of you want to talk about and share. So perhaps like picking 3 things that you're passionate about and those things that identify you. But obviously, I already said, we discussed that we wear many hats. So I'm not about to chop and change what I leave behind. But some of the aspects we're talking about are things I've spoken about at length, for instance. So some of those answers are so much easier to get to. And then the other part is just trusting that, yo, man, like you've already asked me. I don't think you need to do any more to kind of prove that you want to have this chat and that you think that I have something of value to contribute. Whether or not the next person does, that's their thing. But I have to just trust me. I have to have a little bit of faith in myself and that what I put out kind of translates. And even if it doesn't, that's also cool. Like, we're young, and we're not going to always get it right the first time. So sometimes you trust yourself in the wrong ways. You're like, whoa, no, that was not a good idea. Let me just reverse it a little bit. And other times you dive and you commit and you trust and you see the fruit of your labor. And it's just like, I need to remember this feeling. Next time I'm down, or next time I'm insecure about something, I must remember that the last time I trusted my gut or I listened to myself, it actually worked out.
Ooh, fire. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean about the answers? I literally just said that. Okay. So you have shared some incredible insights. I cannot thank you enough for this discussion and this conversation. For me, I'm not gonna lie, I have these conversations for myself. If people happen to listen to them, I'm always like, great. But at the end of the day, it's just conversations, and I'm like, I wonder about this. Who would like to come talk about it? Boom. So thank you so much. This is a personal thank you from me. But I want to find out, for people who may be tuned in and listening to this, what piece of advice would you want to leave for people in their 20s based on your experiences and your journey thus far?
There is a lesson in every experience. That one has taken me some time to figure out, and hearing it at first doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to always know what the lesson is, or when you're in an experience that is just to teach you something, especially for the more challenging things that people go through in their 20s. And like you said, it's different for all of us. And so, you know, you can't even draw up a scale of like, okay, you're going to go through this and this and this and this. Like, it's going to be your own roller coaster. But remember that, whatever you don't learn, it's going to come back in another version, in another form. And you're going to have to go through that experience all over again. So if you are someone who is self-aware and wants to learn about themselves and the way that things happen around them, because sometimes we're just living in patterns and living in cycles, and all cycles and all patterns are good for us. And it takes so much harder to recognize those because you almost lean on them as like your survival crutch, or, oh, that's just how I do things, you know? But when you really interrogate, like some of our actions don't serve us, really. And it's also up to you. You hold the decision to make a choice that's literally going to change what tomorrow looks like, or what the rest of your life looks like. The other one would be, we must all start to accept that we don't know everything. And as soon as we begin to accept that, we know that some of the mistakes that we've made, we need to own up to. Just apologize, take responsibility, be accountable, be transparent, because it will serve you so much better in life to be able to say sorry and recognize when you've made a mistake or when you've assumed something. And this one is like a constant, like, I try so hard to be the best version of myself. And sometimes I return to the idea that even as that person, you have the capacity to hurt people you care about. Not intentional. Sometimes it's because you're careless, or sometimes it's because you really didn't think that it would land a certain way. But I mean, it always works. That's what life is. And you're going to experience that with family, with friends, and in your professional world. So just be as open as you can to the idea of making mistakes. That way you're not going to get defensive about it when it happens, first of all, and always the mature thing to do. It's got nothing to do with maturity. Always the brave thing to do is to just say sorry.
Wow. Wisdom builds a house, indeed. A quotable quote. Quotable quote, straight from the word. But thank you so much for this. So insightful. So incredibly insightful. I cannot wait I know you're moving mountains between social justice, between pageants, between economics, between theater, and I'm personally excited to see what your next steps are going to look like, what you do next, what happens next, because it's exciting to witness and to see. I wish I was as confident as you are when I was 25. Hey, my 25s was a mess. Mess.